Where to begin? I mean, I'd like to jump right into Sky House, but I have to. It's like I can't have the ice cream sundae before the meal. I have to wait a little bit. Um, I've been following your work for long before the idea of this podcast series came up. I've been very inspired by your work. Um, I would love to hear, Monica, Scott, a little bit about your stories individually and then collectively, uh, where you grew up, how you got to where you are today, what inspired you, education, just a little bit of history or story about you and the firm.
Okay, well, I guess I will start. So my name is Monika Haefelfinger. I was born and raised in Basel, Switzerland. I moved to the US when I was 21, and I thought, like many Europeans, I thought, well, I'll go there for 1 year and then I'm going back home. My mom, born and raised in California, so I had this very strong connection to California, and I moved here initially just to spend time with my mom. But I ended up studying architecture here at USC, and then later graduate work at Columbia in New York, and just fell in love with California. Let's see what else. From there, I spent some time again in Europe. I worked for Herzog and de Meuron in the 90s, and then came back to California. Worked here, eventually started XTEN with my late husband, Austin Kelly, in 2000. And, just kept on working. Scott joined us very early on, now principal at XTEN. And we've just been fortunate to do great projects, mostly here in California, but also in Spain and the Middle East, Switzerland. Yeah, that's sort of my story.
I'm going to ask you about those because I've looked at a lot of those projects on your site and on your Instagram. And Scott, I understand not as far of a departure as coming from Switzerland, from Portland, Oregon, if I remember correctly. Yeah. You made the move south to. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so born and raised in Portland. I moved down to California for undergraduate school at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. Studied abroad in Copenhagen for a year. And, really, I think most of that was just, a lot of it was traveling around and visiting kind of prominent architectural works throughout Europe. So that was a great experience. Went to work for another firm in LA after graduating, AGPS Architecture, that has another Swiss connection. And after kind of getting my feet wet for 3 years there, went to graduate school at UCLA. And after that, started working for XTEN Architecture. So I think kind of the Swiss sensibility was, something already ingrained in me. So that was a pretty easy transition. And have spent the last 13 years at, developing that firm.
Small world when you talk about the idea of Swiss influence. My partner Stefan in Urban Bonfire, who is really the product designer, engineer, his entire family is Swiss. His mother is actually from Basel as well, and
really?
I think that yes, her name is Vreni Marchant, and again moved to Canada when she was young with her sisters, and they grew up here in Montreal, or Stefan, his siblings certainly did, but I think brings some of that innate, can't necessarily articulate it, put your finger on it, but there's something cultural in that sensibility and not wasting, and things are designed to be efficient and functional, and that is an undertone of everything that he does, whether it is premeditated or not. It's funny how you say, or you bring that the idea that Swiss thinking in things, and known for great quality and craftsmanship, and just the beauty of products. So yeah, interesting that small world as always.
When I was in undergraduate school, my professors kept on telling me, "Oh my God, your project is so Swiss," and I didn't know. to me, it just, I couldn't understand I couldn't put my finger on it, but later on, of course, there's something very, yeah, it's just very systematic thinking, I think, and just the kind of, like, we work on our designs and we really try to pare things down to the absolute essence of what is needed, and sort of this reductive approach there. Yeah, I guess it has Swiss roots, but we've been we've been playing with that for for a long time over here now. And I think with California, the sort of freedom of being a little bit more experimental has helped us come up with something that's, it's not quite Swiss, it's not quite Californian, but it's somewhere in between.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. It's a great it's a great leap into the first thing I wanted to ask you about. So before Urban Bonfire was ever even a dream, I spent almost a decade working in a very specialized type of real estate practice, planning and developing mixed use projects, cities, universities, resort towns. And one of the contributing factors that we understood and that we've researched is a worldwide movement into urbanity. And statistically, they say that, in 1950, about 75% of the world's population was rural, 25% urban. And by 2050, in just 100 years, which in the history of mankind, if you will, is nothing, it's like it's a blink, that number will have inverted itself, where 75% of the world's population will live in cities in urban settings. I notice on your website, Instagram, the work you've done, and I'll just give an example in LA. When you work on projects in, for example, Manhattan Beach or in Hermosa, where there's far more restrictive nature in terms of size and density compared to other areas where larger homes, more landscape. As an architect, as someone who is charged with the responsibility and the joy, and I'm sure sometimes the headache of articulating your clients' visions into where they're going to live and where they're going to create home, are those types of challenges, which are very European in orientation, more dense living, smaller spaces, are those welcomed creative opportunities, more challenging than your larger footprint homes where you have a lot more flexibility? I'd like to understand this because I think it's a really important discussion point for our audience, is how much people are moving into urban and smaller spaces where every square inch is just critical, and how the responsibility of the architect and or designer in that is just far more under the microscope than when you have an acre and you're building 10,000 square feet. You've got a lot more wiggle room. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your experience on that long-winded question slash statement slash subject.
Well, I'll start on that, Monika.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's interesting is there definitely is a scale shift and a shift in attitude that you have to bring to each project. I don't think one is kind of more challenging than the other, or I wouldn't say we prefer one to the other. They're both great challenges, but there is an efficiency that you need to attack kind of these tighter projects with, where you're really fighting for every square inch, where every space of storage that you can squeeze out, and in a way you're kind of, with these larger projects, there's kind of a generosity of space that you're allowed to give, where in the tighter projects, you're kind of always pushing up to the limits of like, well, how small can we make this, right? And have it still feel comfortable, or even just provide the use that it needs to provide. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just completed a house in Hermosa Beach where, tight lot right on the strand, and it's just a different kind of puzzle, right? It was 3 stories, and it's more of a vertical stacking of space, and yeah, really, really maximizing things. But I agree. There's no preference. You know, when we get to play with space, if it's big space, little space, we just enjoy arranging it and maximizing it for our clients.
And you mentioned earlier projects in Spain, Switzerland, Middle East. Do you see major differences, cultural differences, for example, or where people want to deploy investment? And I don't just mean financially, I also mean time and focus and attention. Do you see real difference and nuance in clients in California versus European that you can put your finger on and create certain you see certain styles or trends are more important in some places than others, or vice versa?
I actually see a lot of commonality. You know, our clients, they wanna create just a comfortable space for their family, and that, you know, whether that is in Spain or here, it's the same. It's the same. They want to create a welcoming home. And luckily for us, you know, this kind of the California way of indoor-outdoor living has caught on elsewhere, and that's why we get contacted by clients from abroad. But I think it's more of a common thread rather than necessarily differences that we encounter.
Beautiful. Scott, anything on to add? Or
you know, I think also just like a lot of the reason that we're contacted for these projects, right, are really that they want us to bring kind of our approach and our kind of, I guess, approach to California living to these locations, right? So, you know, I think it's us finding a way to take what we do already and kind of adapt it to some more specific local conditions, rather than trying to start with what's happening there.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think certainly from what I see, and I'm obviously biased because I'm in the outdoor space activation world. That's really what the heart of what we do is. What seems to be interesting, and Monika, kind of goes to your point, the idea of California living, where it's a fairly simple deduction to make that with gorgeous weather, inside outside living quite seamlessly is far easier there than it is in Montreal or in Switzerland, for example, just based on weather and climate. But I think you make a very astute point in that the idea that indoor outdoor California living is spreading on an almost worldwide basis, regardless of climate. What do you see as I mean, it's not new, but it's certainly been in an accelerated pace over the last decade, certainly. What do you attribute that to over the last while, that that idea of that California living is so intoxicating and so desirable that everyone wants a piece of it?
I mean, I think I can only put myself back in my shoes when I thought I would only spend a year here, and I've spent many, many years here. I mean, there's something to the way of you know, this laid back California style is just, it's, I mean, once you've experienced it, I think everybody wants to have a little bit of it, even if their summers are shorter and they can't quite spend so much time outside, but just to really take full advantage. And now I think with COVID, you know, there's the other element. People need to be outdoors as much as they can. So I think it's just a healthy way of enjoying the beautiful climate here, and other people are, I mean, it's not necessarily, you know, I mean, you see that in Europe in the summertime when all the banquettes and tables are put outside and everybody is enjoying the sunshine. It's just, I think it's human nature, and we are drawn to this kind of okay, I don't want to say camping necessarily, but human species loves being outside, and we're just lucky that we get to spend a little bit more. You know, it's December here. It's a beautiful day.
Mhm.
It's so I think yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other things that translate, right, despite temperature differences, right, are really some of the attributes of kind of indoor outdoor living, which is just like a visual connection to the outdoors and
Yeah.
an abundance of natural light, right? Whereas I think historically buildings are based more on kind of sheltering, right? And these things are all
Sure.
the openings are a little smaller. And so now, even in projects where we don't have the opportunity to create like maybe a connection to a large outdoor space, I think we still are always after a visual connection.
Well, I mean, I've talked about this in the past. I mean, if you think about 10 or 15 years ago, I don't know that there was the same uh, awareness of things like nano walls and huge glass doors. There was a little bit more of a visual and experiential divide between indoor and outdoor. And those lines seem very blurred today, if at all, where now, I mean, it really feels like the idea of an outdoor space, it's really now outdoor room or rooms plural.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask you, do you feel that there has been significant advancement in uh, technology as it relates to materials, uh, heat, shade? People now can have TVs outdoors. I mean, almost, I don't want to say everything, but almost anything that you can have indoors today, luxurious furniture, sofas, cushions, it's almost all now available. It has morphed itself. Do you think that has been a contributing factor to people being more ready and willing to invest in their outdoors? It's just a lot more options of what to do with the space.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the glazing systems that you mentioned, but also things like the fabrics that you put on outdoor furniture.
Mhm.
They are so gorgeous that you can actually use them on in your indoor indoor sofa as well. The house that
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier. The interior designer chose a fabric specifically for the outdoor furniture, that the kind of beach room that's an indoor space
Mhm.
has the same continuous fabric, and there's a certain ease, and that is technology driven, right?
Yeah.
These fabrics are becoming softer, and you're not sitting on plastic. So it's
Sure.
just, I think all these things, glazing, outdoor kitchen, outdoor heating, and the list goes on. I mean, it's really helpful, and
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 Scott,
sort of accelerated this.
Yeah.
have you seen a noticeable shift in your clients' um, interest in outdoors comparatively to, say, 5 or 10 years ago, where a lot of times, especially at the interior designer level, the indoors or their role sort of stopped at the patio door, and the outside was talk to the landscape firm. And
Yeah.
now we're seeing a lot of interior design companies are dropping the term interior and going just with design firm, because they, for a whole host of reasons, economics, design continuity, full project alignment. They are now not only gravitating into, but embracing the outdoors in a way. Have you seen a change in your clients' interest in what can be done in the outdoor realm?
Yeah, and I think that yes, I have seen that change, and I think that it just starts. It kind of starts earlier on, right? It's part of your kind of program brief from the clients, right? What they're looking for, their list of rooms, right? The outdoor spaces that they really want are kind of already baked into that, already part of
Mhm.
that. And then I think the other part that you had really talked about is, as a design team, how we're addressing it. And I think it's all of that is becoming more blurred, right?
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of like the architecture is moving further out into the landscape is coming closer to the architecture. You've got, you know, the designers that of course are bridging both aspects of that.
Mhm.
But you know, I think the really successful projects are the ones where those you're getting feedback from everybody, you know, and everybody is really working as a team, right, on all aspects of the project.
Yeah. We talked a couple moments ago about technology and things like fabrics and furniture. I want to go or discuss with you the idea of technology at the consumer level. I would argue that, let's say 10 years ago, House, Pinterest, and other types of sites that inspire, educate consumers on what can be done, or projects, these things didn't really exist, or if they did, they were just in their infancy. Whereas today, these are tools that are readily available to the consumer who might not be able to have, you know, without it, articulated, I like this, I don't like this, I love the way these steps work, I love the way this, where they might not have had, myself included, the vocabulary to even articulate to a design professional what I'm actually trying to get across. Conversely, one of the design professional or the architect's role is to extract that, I think, from the client and present it to them, the realm of possible in that vision. So the question I have is, do you see these technologies as enhancers or positives to what you do? Or do you also see them in some ways as they can be negative or somewhat stifling to what you do, because the consumer now says, I want this or I don't want this? How does technology play into your communication, if you will, with your clients?
I mean, I think it's a little bit similar to um, when clients would tear out pages out of magazines
Mhm.
and do their research that way. But you're right. I mean, there's an abundance of imagery out there right now. They can sort of visually explain to us in much more detail what they are looking for.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I think it's sort of, there's pros and cons, but I think it's still a plus that you can get all this visual information about products. I think it helps the consumer.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and it does. I mean, it does change the way that it changes the process in a way, and I think it kind of forces you to get more specific with things earlier on, maybe where
Okay.
they kind of remain in a kind of conceptual level longer. But now I think just if you have a client who's bringing a lot of images that they are really drawn to, right? There's a lot of detailed information in there that you're kind of
Mhm.
sifting through early on.
As you do that, I imagine that you really are you're in the inspiration business, but you have very defined rules of where you can push boundaries, and where, you know, designers have potentially a little bit more realm with color, material, those types of things, where architecture has so many scientific, factual regulations, rules, codes that inform everything. After so many years of doing this and countless projects and awards, where do you go for inspiration? What inspires you? Is it on a per project level? Is it in your regular lives and you take inspiration in a less defined way that weaves itself into your work? Where do you seek inspiration for your work and your projects?
I think, you know, I think that's a little bit of everything, right? I wouldn't say there's one location that you kind of go to, right? But that's, you know, I think that's still like, sure, Pinterest, flipping through that, but I think it's also
Mhm.
looking at other architects' work, other artists' work,
Yeah.
photography. I think there's Yeah, it's everything that kind of touches our lives.
Hmm. And also, of course, nature. Just going for a walk on the beach, or just enjoying just sometimes stillness can be very helpful. Like you have Pinterest and you have all these tools, but just a more quiet, calm space can also just be very refreshing.
Yeah.
Going back to nature, I think.
It's interesting, I manufacture a line of outdoor cabinetry, and when people say, "So what inspires you?" and I trace that back to the experience of me at 6 years old and working with my dad building this bonfire pit to burn old docks and old trees that were dead on our property. That was the inspiration, not for the actual cabinet or anything else, but for the feeling of connectivity and that's what has informed everything that I've done with Urban Bonfire. That's kind of the story of trying to recreate that feeling and that experience in what we do. So it's interesting how it can come from very subtle places, and often very much from our past, and not necessarily in the immediate from our present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
That is very cool that you were doing this with your dad.
My
Right,
parents bought Yeah, my parents bought a non-winterized home on wooden stumps, no foundation, an hour north of Montreal, where I live, on a lake for $28,000 in 1980. And the property had not been used in almost 30 years and literally was in complete chaos. I mean, old stairs, docks in the water, fences down, and he built a bonfire pit, which was designed to be 100% functional. Just how do we clear this property? We have to literally burn off this amount of debris. And it turned into something incredibly celebratory. Over time, the next year, our neighbor brought a guitar, and then people started coming over. And 10 years later, a Saturday night in July, we could have 25 or 30 people around this place. And it was the greatest memory of my youth. And I
Uh-huh.
learned from it I think, Monika, you mentioned the idea of being in nature, and that whole sort of concept of there's a certain simplicity that happens outdoors. And I noted that there were sitting around this bonfire pit on a Saturday night. There was a multimillionaire, and sitting next to him on a bench was a gentleman who drove a taxi. And they were both toasting marshmallows and both happy on exactly the same sort of level. And I loved the idea that it is an experience that brings out the most common and authentic parts of us, I feel,
Hmm.
typically.
Yeah, I mean, it's those moments where you're able to build something, or to, I mean, even if you go out into your yard and you work that in the yard, and you have this very direct, you're working this area, and there is change, and there's a transformation, and this transformation happens very quickly. And I think in the outdoors you get that. We work on projects that take a very long time to from beginning to end, but kind of these very quick, and but very rewarding tasks, like your backstory that you just mentioned, is very beautiful, and I think it does bring people together, and it sort of nourishes the soul, I think.
It is what lights me up every day. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not a tribute to my father who passed away almost 10 years ago. But it is something that I'm very cognizant and aware of, that the simple sacrifices that he and my mother made to do this, to get us this property. And you don't necessarily know when you're a child or a teenager, even into your early adulthood, the impact of those types of things. But when you connect the dots later, and wow, if they had not done that, there would be no urban bonfire. It's an impossibility. You can't connect the dots. Steve Jobs, one of my favorite quotes of his ever was, you can't connect the dots moving forward, only looking backward. So nothing is necessarily a mistake if you try and you learn and you can only connect the dots of where you are today by looking backwards. And I think about that a lot. If you had gone back to Switzerland and not stayed, how would your life have been different, compared to where maybe it would have been, but
Yeah,
so hard to know.
We'll never know.
Never know.
So true.
Tell me a little bit about, and I've been on the site, I see tell me about the Sky House, and it just, from the pictures online and looking at it, it just looks so, it's breathtaking. Tell me a little bit about the project, the inspiration, what you did. I would just love to hear from you.
So yes, Sky House, the client's young family, one son, contacted us, and at the time we were, going back and forth to Switzerland quite a bit, and the Basel Museum had just opened a few years prior to that. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the Basel Museum in Basel. It's this Renzo Piano building, gorgeous, basically 5 walls with this very light roof structure that separates the different gallery spaces. And that was a little bit the kernel of the inspiration for Sky House. At Sky House, we have these 4 very solid volumes, and between the 4 volumes, there's this open space that is covered with this series of skylights. Not, the building doesn't look anything like the Basel Museum, but a little bit just the kernel of the inspiration came from there. And the skylights are organized on a grid, and there what we were doing was basically the site is perched up in the Hollywood Hills, and you look down onto the city grid. And so we wanted to echo the city grid up in the main space of the house. So those were some of the broad strokes. Scott, you can add some more information about Sky House.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, it was similar to many of our projects in our kind of connection to the outdoors, I think. Mm-hmm. But I think the really unique thing was was kind of washing all the main primary spaces with light with this skylight system. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives it just changes the whole project and gives it such a unique feel, right? And so, I think each of those kind of reinforced then with your visual connection, right, to the canyon in one direction, to a private garden in another. So we're kind of these slices of the outdoors entering the house.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think one other thing that is different about the house is the house is located at the end of a cul-de-sac, and once you drive up to the house, you sort of dip down into the cul-de-sac, and there's these 2 white volumes that have a stainless steel door between them, and that's the main entrance. Once you open that, so there's this, you come from the city, you're at the end of the cul-de-sac, and there's this moment of quiet. It's a little bit mysterious. You don't know. It's not a big reveal right away. The reveal happens gradually as you move in through the space. You enter a courtyard where there's a reflecting pool with stepping stones that lead you to the front door. And from there, everything opens up and reveals itself layer by layer until you're finally on the other side of the building where the pool, there's an infinity edge pool that creates the edge to the canyon and then the city below. So it's quite a beautiful view when you're standing or when you're swimming in that pool, actually.
Yeah. I would like to say just one of the other, I think, successful features of the project for me is really the sensitivity of placing kind of the house into the hillside. And, you know, I think from echoing what Monika was saying is just kind of like the experience and the approach from the street is kind of this very subdued experience. Right? You kind of see it as this one story project, you know, kind of sitting in this natural setting of grasses, of native grasses, and really just using the hillside to kind of tuck the house into it and then open up onto the canyon views.
It sounds like it mirrors in some ways human connection, which is based on levels and reveal. And, you know, we don't go into relationships with knowing everything about everybody the first time we see them. There's, you know, the idea of the cul-de-sac and, you know, getting to know someone, whether it's a person or even an activity or a hobby, whatever it may be. The idea that we start and we continue to evolve and there's levels and grow till we're, you know, as you say it, in that beautiful place of the pool and overlooking all those. It sounds like it almost takes the trajectory of human relationships in a certain way as the evolution of going through the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it slows your pace down. It's very calming to be in that house. And you know, I think this house, the indoor-outdoor living, because it's basically an L shape once you're on the other side of the house, and all of the glass sliders open up. So when you're in your garden, you're also in your kitchen, in the family room. You have a very easy connection to the living room and the outdoor entertainment areas. It's all one big space. But then you can close things off and you can be private, and you can, you know, there's flexibility in the way the project was designed and laid out.
Very cool. Beautiful. I want to thank you very, very much, both of you, for your time today. I've enjoyed the time together very much, and I will continue to follow your work with great inspiration. I absolutely love what you do. I don't say that just flippantly. I genuinely look at your site and I'm just in awe of you know, really breathtaking work. And thank you for sharing your time with me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you. I wish you and your families continued health, safety, and I hope everything continues to improve in California and the world for that matter. And I hope when travel allows, I can make it to California, where a lot of our businesses in California, and one of my oldest and best friends in the world recently moved from Hermosa Beach to Palos Verdes. So I hope when I come down, I get to meet with you in person. It would be a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Yeah, and Montreal is a great city too, you know.
Oh,
I spent time there and it's beautiful.
Did you?
Yes,
I absolutely love Montreal. The weather is tough, but I can't see living anywhere else. There is something magical about this city that you know, I absolutely love it.
But we would definitely welcome meeting you in person, and thank you so much for your interest in our work. We enjoyed talking.
Mine.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
As did I.
Pleasure.
Be well. Thank you both very, very much. Stay safe.